so the situation was, he was flying into Cleveland to meet me, and it was a twofold purpose. One was to have our own get together, which I didn't know that going into it, but it was never going to get that far, of course. But he had an interest in an intimate get together, and during that time, his goal was to offload his 20 gigs of kiddie porn onto my machine to get to coax me and teach me to come out more and into that age group. So it was really bizarre. Our phone conversations were equally bizarre, and I could tell he was damaged goods. He came at it from a very strong perspective, an intense perspective, and he was very open to share with me his Satanism.
Mm-hmm.
So there was for him a religious aspect of the satanic cult, and what was interesting was, I come from a Christian background, and this was one of the moments in my career where I felt like I was fighting something bigger than a dark side of humanity, and I interestingly enough felt the need to, act upon my own religious faith in dealing with this person, and so he flew
So
in.
you prayed about it. Is that what you're
A
saying?
little more than that.
Okay.
I got with the head of my church and said, look, I'm doing what I'm doing as a man and as an officer, but this person is coming from a dark place, and when I talk to him and deal with him, it's like getting a taste of the abyss a bit, and I want to clothe myself up.
So you wanted the covering, the spiritual
Oh, yeah,
covering, as
without
you were
question.
going into
Absolutely.
spiritual
I
warfare.
mean, I sought out a Catholic priest and met and went through a confession and a prayer type of a service.
Yes.
Within days of his arrest, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a dark individual, and so he shared that information with me. He shared some of the things that he did on international layover flights, and his goal was to fly into Cleveland for us to meet, drive to my place, get together over dinner and afterward, and then have the swap of computer files of kiddie porn. And then he began to continue on through our number of phone calls. All of which were tape recorded, all the appropriate, law enforcement activity was going underway at this time. And he began to talk in a way of things and dreams that he likes. He asked me, what are my fantasies? Now, I'm coming from a strong Christian perspective and a married guy and all that, so to answer his question was way out of bounds
Right.
of anything within my experience. And of course, the answer he was looking for was, what was my fantasy with an 8-year-old, same-sex 8-year-old, and of course I have none. So that was a very difficult part of the conversation, but yet and still I made it through. And at that point in time,
Well, let me stop there.
sure,
So when you're trying to it's not entrapment when we go after
no, because
predators.
it's a predicated person.
It's predicated.
Right.
And so when you had to meet the profile, so to speak, of what he would deem would be acceptable to be engaged with, you actually had to go there.
I did.
And you
Total
had to
make-believe.
express interest in 8-year-olds, even though that's totally outside your constitution.
Absolutely. And then he began to speak he was bounced between the first and third person, and the next thing that he would say, which was things that he wanted to do by picking up some children, taking them out into a wooded area, finding a small tree to tie them to, and doing, and in his words, do to them what was done to him. Or, how did he express it? Do to them things that would make them grow up to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wanted payback, basically. And this is the way he took it out. So I don't know if he did that, was going to do that. That was in his plan before being arrested, or do that with me or not, or what. But it was bizarre, and that phone call, of course, was taped, and all this stuff was used in court. But ultimately, the meet went down, where he flew into the local airport, and a team was put together. There was a team in at the gate. There was a team in the down near the jetway. There was a team at the baggage area. There was a team outside. A lot of prep work went in with the TSA and the local law enforcement where the airport was. And by the time he came out the door with his bags, he had about 12 people, law enforcement, officers following him, Fed and local guys like me. Of course, all the local guys were sworn in as feds for the purpose, so we had wide jurisdiction on any task force case, and he was brought into custody at that point.
Let me stop there, because you're really bringing out some things that I want to make sure the viewers catch. When we talk about perpetrator, predator, pedophiles, and that's what this guy falls in the category of, they are collectors of trophies and souvenirs. And when we say trophies or souvenirs, we're talking about video footage, we're talking about photographs, and that's exactly what Officer Kevin talked about. Officer Kevin also mentioned something else I really want you to get a hold of, and that is he had come from a place where he had been victimized. And his targeted age of children he was going after was the exact age thereabouts of his initial victimhood. So that's important to pay attention to. Now I'm going to say something that's not going to be too popular with some of you out there. Michael Jackson. If you look at it, Michael Jackson's focus was on children of a particular age. And then after they passed that age, he was no longer interested in them. Macaulay Culkin, Emmanuel Lewis, and on and on. I submit to you that somewhere in Michael Jackson's early life, he was sexually abused. Just as what Officer Kevin is talking about with the individual he was talking to that was with the airlines. Go ahead, share more.
Well, you certainly can't put a profile on these folks. I mean, in law enforcement, the word profile can be looked upon with great disdain. But at the same time, a bank robber robs a bank the way they rob banks.
That's right.
A profile of how a criminal behaves is one thing, and the profile of the character of a person, race, or ethnicity is quite another.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, the public really doesn't, discriminate between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, every day when we're on the road, we're looking for that pattern of criminal behavior, and that profile leads us to some pretty significant arrests. Well, the profile of a predator has similarities to it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with it is you cannot pigeonhole any particular type of human being to that. Now, for all the cases that have ever been reported, you could see, if it were to be graphed out and tabulated, that there is a predominant group involved in this kind of stuff. But really, it runs the gamut. The task force I was on has arrested, of course, this airline steward, white male, seminarian, juvenile black male, which was interesting because the whole time we thought it was an adult. In fact, when we got into this, we thought it was the adult car owner because we had the address, all the social security numbers of the people living in that address, all the license plates that ever registered the address, all the neighbors around the address. We had a lot of information. And through the course of the courtship on chat, came to understand type, make, color of the car. Amazing when people are motivated to get something, what they'll say. And turned out to be a juvenile male that was lost in the world of what am I, same-sex orientation or not, bored, online, had a victim at hand, So I had a few female people that were chatting with me. Those didn't come to the point of arrest, but they were working it, and they did not ever get to the point of meeting all the elements or actually traveling. So you really, can't. Well, look, Penn State, great example.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have known?
Mm-hmm.
Could be the guy next door. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we didn't talk about was a program I'm involved with, and it's the kind of a thing where really law enforcement can't drive around in the police cruiser and know what's going behind the wall of that house, the wall of that school. Penn State case, the walls of the locker room. There was a case that the task force handled prior to my arrival to the task force of an individual that had access to a school after hours and had his grandkids in there, violating them and having them violate each other at prepubescent ages. Mm-hmm. And that guy was taken into custody. Another case that was going on when I came into the task force was another older person. Don't want to say elderly, that might upset all them 60-year-olds who are still young out there. But this man was up in his 60s, and he happened to be a counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist of troubled youth coming out of a penal situation. And this man was violating these kids. So from 60-ish on down to the juvenile that I arrested, across the spectrum of socioeconomic parameters, you just don't know who has this penchant or desire for children and are, through the anonymity of the internet, are executing it. Now, getting to the anonymity, the anonymity of the internet, I want everybody out there in TV land to know there is no anonymity on the internet, and I can tell you that with certitude from my police investigations. I only need one piece of information relative to criminal activity on the internet and some subpoena power, and we're going to be there. We'll find you. So those are the means by which we concluded all these cases.
I want to jump in there, and then we're going to talk about a very exciting program, a very relevant and needed program that Officer Kevin has, that we're going to figure out a way to get it to you. But some other things that have come out of this is that perpetrator, predator, pedophiles not only are collectors of souvenirs and trophies, but they engage in communities where they swap and trade these materials. And so as this airline stewardess engaged Officer Kevin, thinking he was someone else, he offered up his material in exchange. And for someone that's of that culture, that's a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal. We get a lot of evidence from these folks.
Yes, and I think, and I don't know if you, in your mind, process this, you can tell me if you have, but me hearing this for the first time, I think that that was his offer up to you, something of value for someone twisted in exchange for a relationship.
I will go even further, and I'm confident in saying these things, is that this subculture of people that have this interest in children have their own mascot, and it's called Pedo Bear. Obviously, pedo for pedophile, and the bear, and it's holding a bag of candy. And if you go online and do some research on Pedo Bear, you'll start getting the picture. You could Google Pedo Bear and click on the images tab in your Google search, and you'll see Pedo Bear images all over the place. You could do research on news items of Pedo Bear and other things about Pedo Bear and come to understand a bit of its history. Now, these people will indicate, the subculture will indicate, well, that was just a joke, it's funny, it's just a cute little thing. But really, if you take a strong look at some Google searches of images or news items or other information surrounding Pedo Bear, you'll come to realize that it's a means by which they could identify each other.
Yes.
Beyond that, there was a big stink, I don't remember if it was eBay or Amazon.com, over the sale of a How to Be a Pedophile book. And you could do some research on how to be a pedophile on Amazon and slap it all together in a Google search, and you may very well find the news articles in which people were up in arms that Amazon would sell the book. And of course, at the time, their position was one of not curtailing any written material on a freedom of speech issue versus they don't take a stand on the item, they just sell it. They're a go-between. But ultimately, I think the sales of that book plummeted and it was out of circulation. So.
Let's talk about your product. Officer Kevin has a product because we really have to arm families. That's a missing link. No one is asking where were the parents in the Sandusky case. We have to meet their needs, and if we don't meet their needs by informing them, then more children are going to be victimized. Officer Kevin, tell us about your program and your product.
Sure. Well, in the time we have left, very simply, my program came out of this internal desire and understanding that law enforcement can never get ahead of the curve of this crime and the technology associated with it on a case-by-case basis because of the volume of work that's necessary to bring one case to adjudication, as we're seeing in the Sandusky case out of Penn State. So my thought was, if there was a way that I could put together, even if it's down to the most basic educational information, and get education into the minds of the children, that the internet is a great place to be, to learn, to work, to play, but that it poses significant danger by people who are predisposed to certain criminal behavior and think that in what they believe to be anonymity can trick and play upon the naiveness of a juvenile to get the juvenile. And they do get them. There's no mistake in that. So I put together a program that I call ECOP, E-COPP, and people can learn more about it at ecop.com. Again, have the hyphen in there, E-COPP.com. And it's basically a 2 DVD set whereby parents, teachers, children's programs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whoever, can take the DVD, plop it into the DVD tray and press play, and 4 lessons plans will unfold. Teachers have to do nothing. It is a full 4 series curriculum. Lessons plans are laid out. The DVD runs, there's 4 chapters, 1 chapter at a time, corresponding workbook. The knowledge is pretty common, but there is a teacher's manual to assist them. And really what it is it's meant for 3rd and 4th graders to see, hear, and then in the workbook read, write what they've learned.
You know, I think it's very important. Officer Kevin and I are going to be appearing over at Cleveland State University, as Cleveland really will represent Cleveland State, the first college campus to really take a serious look at this and how they're arming their administrators to be aware if they have a predator amongst them. One of the most troubling things for both Officer Kevin and myself, I have a prior background in law enforcement, is that we can never know who these people are. As Officer Kevin indicated, there was a stewardess, there was someone in the clergy, there was a juvenile. The behaviors are the same, but they can come from anywhere. And the most troubling thing is when we have the brethren in law enforcement that end up in these spaces, or other coaches, for myself. It puts us in the position where we have to go overboard to make sure people clearly understand that we are about the right thing in best interest of the kids. And that's what we're about. So we hope that the information that you got today will be of benefit to you. Go to his website, look at his website, get those materials, go to your parent-teacher organization, your PTO, and encourage them to purchase that material to make sure that every family, every home has that product. Because if you don't stand in the gap to protect your children, you never know who has their eyes to victimize your children are setting up the ways to do it. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
So the situation was, he was flying